Okay, good evening and welcome. It's great to see so many people tonight. Thank you all for coming. My name is Biljana Ćirić and I'm the founder of Curatorial course, What Should Curating Do? We are very honored, me and my team, that we can host together with Museum of Contemporary Art our 5th lecture by Hou Hanru, Artistic Director of MAXXI, National Museum for 21st Century Art and National Museum of Architecture, Rome, Italy. Before I continue with introduction, I would like to thank Istituto Italiano di Cultura Belgrado, their team, especially Director Davide Scalmani for support of Curatorial School and sharing the vision of importance for this initiative. Davide was, I want to share this with you because I think it was very important for me. We had a curatorial workshop with the curators yesterday and Davide was like present for 3 hours, listening what Hou Hanru was talking with the curators. So I would like to invite Davide to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Biljana. I'm also honored to have the possibility to introduce Mr. Hou Hanru this evening to this audience. I think it's an extraordinary opportunity for you and for us to listen to one of the, I think, most important curators in contemporary art world today. He is a very original, very interesting perspective about art world, and not just that. So, to me, Bina told you about yesterday's experience. To me, his lecture yesterday was really an intellectual experience, really something that was deeply involved with my past also, because we are same generation. But he has a completely different point of view that he is able to integrate different visions, different positions. I think he's in the best position among all of us to tell an original story relating art, society, the present, the past, the future. Very interesting. So, Biljana, I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you, David. So, Hou Hanru yesterday at the workshop reminded us that the work of curator can never be separated from reality. That we have to think on our arrival to a certain place, how we contribute to locality, but also what kind of global network we produce. Hou Hanru's presentation will outline certain aspects of the program developed by Hou Hanru at the MAXXI, his vision strategies for re-engagement of a contemporary art institution with civic society in the time of the global crisis. As part of this, he will also discuss some of the challenges of running 21st century institution, its complexity, reality, and the actions he took. And before I hand the floor to him, I would just read a brief bio, only some parts, because it's very, very long. Hou Hanru is a prolific writer and curator based in Rome, Paris, and San Francisco. He is currently Artistic Director of MAXXI, Rome in Italy. He has curated and co-curated over 100 exhibitions in the last 2 decades across the world. Some notable examples include the China Avant-Garde, National Museum of Art of China, Beijing in 1989. Actually, his first show was in 1984, he told us yesterday. Cities on the Move between 1997 and 2000, they travel around the world. Second Johannesburg Biennial, Shanghai Biennial 2000, Guangzhou Biennial 2002, Venice Biennale French Pavilion 1999, Zones of Urgency 2003, and Chinese Pavilion 2007 at Venice. Second Guangzhou Triennial, the exhibition and the public program of San Francisco Art Institute, and the 10th Istanbul Biennale in 2007, 10th Biennial de Lyon in 2009, and 5th Auckland Triennial in Auckland, New Zealand in 2013, among many other international exhibitions. He is an advisor for a number of cultural institutions and frequently contributes to various journals on contemporary art and culture, lectures, and teaches in a number of international institutions. Actually, I have to say that I've seen many exhibitions by Hou Hanru in China and abroad, and they somehow inform my curatorial practice and thinking how to think about curating. But I had a very rare opportunity to hear him speaking. So I'm really happy that we can all do this together tonight. Hou Hanru, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this fantastic opportunity to be with you and actually to find a new home in Zagreb. In Belgrade. Yeah. My older home in this part of the world actually started with Zagreb. This is why, because my first visit to the so-called ex Yugoslavia was actually Zagreb, and then I went to Ljubljana, and then you know, and then now I found myself in Belgrade, which is really maybe the summit of my the beginning of kind of high moments of my possible engagement with this part of the continent, part of the world, and that there's so many things that has actually influenced how I worked, potentially, directly, and also maybe in the future continues to be influential. For example, I have a few friends with whom who have been working here, you know, also what is fantastic is someone like Vienna. I met her in China. When I escaped from China, in a way, I don't live in China anymore, and went back to China and met someone like her, fantastically doing fantastic work, and also really has an important influence in the Chinese scene. And this is also she did. Just tell you that don't be jealous. She did not do that anymore, not yet here. And she did a book about Shanghai scene, the history of exhibitions in Shanghai, which is something even I'm very jealous. It would be a part of my ambition to do something like this, to be able to, you know, to look at the Chinese situation from a perspective of someone living there from a place like Belgrade, and also you know, having a contemporary perspective on what's happening globally today in a place like Shanghai. So all this together actually shows the condition in which we are actually working today in this world, as individuals, as also institutions, that I think give us a very important kind of starting point to look at what we want to discuss tonight, and not only tonight, maybe in general. So, as Bianna said, I always try to bring my work. Of course, it's not only me. It's a little bit embarrassing to say I. It's really, you know, people like us. We continue to try to make sense of what we are doing. The more you work, the more you actually have question about what's the meaning of the sense that we continue to work in the contemporary art world, also in the intellectual life in general, while everything becomes somehow turning towards something that we might not identify with in the beginning. For example, when I look through the collection here, it's such a fantastic collection, especially there's some moments when artists decided to forget all the problems, just walk straight across the city, climb up and down to go over all the obstacles, right? And that I don't think behind the head of the artist would have 1 second of thinking, by doing this, I will become famous and rich. But today, it's possible to do so. And there's some people, even coming from the same collection, become famous and rich and powerful. And so that actually somehow makes us think, and also a museum like this beautiful museum, after 10 years of kind of closing door, come back to reopen 2 words. Our world probably has very much changed, or there's a kind of aspiration in our community here to try to change the situation so we can improve to be a part of this famous and rich world, maybe. So I think at least, behind all the museum projects, behind all the institutional projects, there are always a combination of different conditions and also contradictions of intentions that reflects the interest of everybody, from artist to curator, director, collector, and government, investor, and also there's a new thing called all the trustees. It's just not so new in some places, but I think it's going to be quite new, and it's going to be happening in most of the museums in the world today. We need the board of trustees, right? And what they do, it's something that we might talk about that on another occasion. But what I'm saying that is that we are working in the context that we are working in a very particular kind of a moment that we think we should be globalized. But when we think about globalization, we look through all the collection here, you can feel actually a city like Belgrade, a country like Serbia or ex-Yugoslavia or whatever, it has always been in the circulation of the global. It always had a very close relationship with this idea of the global and being a part of the global. When you think about, I was joking, there's some paintings from the 20s, and we had so much beautiful life at the time. Today, very few artists dare to do that in an immoral way, to have a nice boat sailing to the ocean with 3 naked women and having a drink. And the painting was painted in a way that was so fashionable in the 20s, kind of expressionist, a little cubist, a combination of this. But that behind that, we think about the 20s in Shanghai. What was that? It was called the golden age of Shanghai, when you have, one of the biggest jazz clubs in the world, or one of the most beautiful bars in the world, and having all these beautiful people dancing, drinking. On the other side of the street, you also have a global scene of poverty, just like today. So I think this question of globalization didn't really appear today only, but it's always been there. So it gives us a kind of eternal question that when we are artists, we work in the arts, we work in the museum, what are we doing exactly? So there are many answers possible. So being kind of lucky that I was invited to take the job in MAXXI in Rome in 2013. God, every year I try to. Okay. So this is. I prepared a kind of PowerPoint to show the program of the museum. And before that, I would like to say, continue to say that before going to Rome, I actually was working in China, France, America. Living in the sense that you have a place that you call home. You have a key to your door. And you have a family there, and that's China, Paris, and San Francisco, and then Rome, right? And in between, I have been working in many, many places that every time I have a temporary key, sometimes an electronic card. You just use that to open your door, and you sleep alone, and that's a difference, right? So, but in the meantime, I also think every place that I have been so lucky to be able to work there appears to be a part of my home. And this home is not only the artists, it's not only the institutions, the colleagues, and so on. Of course, this is cousins, brothers, sisters, and so on. But also, it's the public and this place. The place is such an important thing when we talk about globalization. Imagine the world has only one kind of place. How boring this life would be. How boring this world is. And imagine there's only one kind of contemporary art that you can see in Art Basel. I have nothing against Art Basel, but I just feel a little bit limited as a choice. If we talk about contemporary art, we think about immediately Art Basel. That's pretty boring. So I think it's important to also think about there are many other possibilities that we can every time, by doing what we're doing, help the place we find ourselves to be a new place. And by working in a museum, working in a biennial and exhibition, it's a kind of temporary engagement. But very often, this temporary engagement ended up being a long-term life dialogue with the place. Even you left the place, even you go somewhere else to work and so on. And this is how we actually learn how to deal with so-called global arts. And global arts doesn't mean there's one type of art, but there's a continuous kind of conversation going on that makes you feel that you left a place, but this place remains a part of your home. So that's I think that the fact that I end up accepting going to Rome, which was a kind of known place and unknown place for me, to work in a very challenging machine. I think that was a kind of secret reason, and I'm curious to see how this home can make it more interesting. And on the other hand, also I found that it's a very important opportunity that I can share a challenge with people who are committed to this institution, namely our team, to see how one can, I will not say invent completely, but one can innovate a institution. And through the institution, one can make some proposal to the innovation of a city life. And the MAXXI probably is one of the best places that one can try this. And in other words, how in a time that everything is looking like Art Basel, I think we can do something else to try to engage ourselves to rethink if a simple life can continue to exist, to develop outside of a direct system of marketing, entertaining, and consuming. Of course, it's inevitable that we have to face all these questions, face all these conditions. But under these conditions, maybe we can still try to generate I will not say alternative possibilities, but a real possibilities that makes something that it's now generally thought as alternative to be something normal, right? So, the MAXXI Museum, of course, started long before I was involved. But actually, I remember in late around 2001 or 2, I visited the site of this place. I just heard that Italy start building a contemporary art museum, a national contemporary art museum. And it's a long story. Maybe Italy has tried many times to build a public contemporary art museum, but it's never been possible for some reasons. So the only one exists as officially a contemporary art museum was Prato, which is in a small provincial city next to Florence. Actually, I was very lucky to spend a few months there in the early 90s. And then there are a few other institutions like Rivoli, the Castello Rivoli, and a few other provincial museums. But at the national level, there's never been a contemporary art museum. So the MAXXI was conceived at the end of the 90s, around 2000, as the first national contemporary art museum, and also for architecture. And then there was an international competition, and then the winner was Zaha Hadid. And so Zaha actually proposed, the site was an old barrack, military barrack, outside of the center of Rome, in which actually the context, maybe I will come back to talk about it a bit later. Very interesting context in the area of Flaminio. And of course, this is a place where you usually don't see on the tourist guide. And so I remember I visited an exhibition of the model of this design of the competition in the original site when there was still the military barrack. And I was quite impressed by the design. It was, and in the meantime, like many of our colleagues, without much, more consideration, thought, well, this is not possible. This kind of design, how can you make an exhibition in it? Like many friends of until today, they say it must be very difficult. It is very difficult, by the way. But let's come back to talk about it. So, and then by destiny or by, I don't know, accident, more than 10 years later, I was invited to work there. So my task was to really, with we have a fantastic team, and especially we have this president of the foundation. She was the culture minister. David knows her, Melandri, Giovanna. She was the culture minister when this project was planned. So we have a very good understanding on what we should do with this museum, and so the museum started actually was finished and opened in 2010. With maybe the final construction was maybe 60% of the original design. The original one was much bigger. The building was opened in 2010, and with already an interesting collection that was accumulated during the preparation years by a colleague, Paulo Colombo, and other colleagues who were running the preparation program. And then also we have a very interesting, very important architecture collection that came from the national collection of the Italian states. And also part of the collection, the art collection from the from the National Gallery of Modern Art, which actually had, it's not so modern anymore because it was an institution created it at the end of the 19th century, basically, and it has a very interesting collection of modern arts from late 19th century to the 80s, basically. So it's a very rich collection, and then we share with them a few objects that coming from that collection as well. So MAXXI started with, and this is during the day, this is during the evening now. And then when I arrived there, the first thing I was trying to propose is to rethink or to think as a new museum how we can engage with the city, how we can engage with the public in the sense of publicness, public sphere, in the sense of in the sense of a culture, a public culture, not simply as a question of clients, people who spend money coming to the museum to consume the art, but really how much a museum, especially as a national institution, the mission of the museum as a public institution, how much we can contribute to reconstruct the public sphere in a time when everything is privatized, in a time that public funding is no longer seen as a good thing in a way. Sometimes even it's seen as an obstacle, a kind of regressive idea of the past. The private money should be contribute to make every individual even more wealthier, and the public money should be used to encourage this tendency rather than in the good old times that public money is used for public education, hospital, and so on and so forth. So it's so it's a time that I think very, very challenging, but also because it's challenging, that it proves that what we are deeply convinced of the importance of being public for an institution like this, even more important. But of course, you know, the question is not simply about who's funding this institution. As a matter of fact, we have to fund the institution about 50% by raising money from all kinds of resources, including public sponsors and private sponsors and so on. But on the other hand, what is important is how to translate this resource into something that not only being used by the public, but also continues to make sense to what we believe as the public good. Or in other words, as a part of the civil society, how we can continue to be civic. But when we talk about civic, it's not simply about being popular. Actually, very often being popular is exactly the opposite of what we call the civic. Being popular very often is to please every individual's desire to benefit or to develop his own interest by voting or by participating in deciding what the society should be. Just like what happens today in this political climate, that populism it's taking over to a great extent of the political life today. And in the art world also, you know, I was joking about the board of trustees. The board of trustees has a also interesting history. This concept comes from American museums, American institutions. The board of trustees usually are benefactors of, rich people who felt that they need to contribute back to the public good because they made money with maybe chance, by luck, or by whatever illegal actions, and they have to pay back. So that was the tradition that supports American museums and many institutions, universities, hospitals, and so on. But things change. Perhaps for the last 20 years or so, the new generation of trustees are very often collectors. Of course, the old ones are also collectors. But these collectors, they collect art. Very often it's not because they love what they collect, but they would actually love the money that they can probably make from what they collect. Meaning that they will collect art as a speculation. Right? And that, of course, I cannot generalize this. There's still a lot of great people who are museum trustees who really support sincerely public culture. But this becomes a tendency which is somehow bringing some confusion and also some strange feeling when you work in a museum that to whom you are serving, right? And then as a matter of fact, that there are more and more museums now kind of dominated by collectors who try to turn the museum into the showroom of the collection, or of the works of the artists they collect, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of interesting things happening, for good and for bad. So in this context, how can we continue to make the MAXXI as a truly public institution with resources from everywhere? So I think one of the key questions is not simply we serve as a public servant, the public, but to make proposals to the public, to share what is potentially possible in their intellectual life, to make them feel they have something more to live with. They would have something, when they come to the museum, they have something more increased in their intellectual, or in their heart, in their emotion. And they come in, they come back, come out with a different feeling about life. And saying that it means actually we should work with artists to develop a program that can challenge the normality of everyone's intellectual or emotional life. And that means art should continue to be raising questions, experimental, and not easy to understand, and how to make the public share the uneasiness or the difficulty that we all love to have. So making a public museum is about how to have the public come on the same boat as you, as the artist, to sail into a sea that you don't know where the destination may be, or to share this crazy exercise of the artist who walk straight over all the obstacles, sometimes fall down, sometimes climb up, and so on, to cut through a city, etc., etc. So being public, meaning that you propose a possibility for the public to challenge themselves. So, well, I said too much theory. So this is not really theory, but we need many books to write about the theoretical reason why we do that. But I always remember that I have to make a first presentation of what I wanted to do with the museum when I arrived. So I quoted Antonio Gramsci, very strangely. And then I said the MAXXI maybe after a few years would become a volcano that start to explode. And what kind of volcano we don't know, but we need to build a volcano. And then I quoted something from Gramsci's writings. And then the next day, in the newspaper, one of the newspapers says, the MAXXI has a new director who may be the last Chinese communist. And by the way, I've never been a Chinese communist, fortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. But anyway, so this is really interesting. And then the few days ago, actually, I'm working on the project. At the end, I will talk about this project. About the street. We are working on a large exhibition about the street. The title is called The Street Where the World is Made. And this project involves exhibitions inside the museum and also interventions in the street. And then one of the projects is by Alfred Deja, who proposed us to put the poster in public spaces, especially in collaboration. We try to collaborate with a bus company. And then the bus company was very, very enthusiastic when they heard of great artists. And then when they looked at the content of the work, they said no. It's very simple. It's a poster quoting a phrase from Gramsci. It was translated from Italian to English and back to Italian. It says literally, the old world is dead. The new world is coming with monsters. So the collaboration didn't happen. So we have to raise money to buy panels, like billboards, space on the publicity billboards. So that's another story. So let's go to the MAXXI. So as you can see, the MAXXI actually, it's designed as a very particular typology of architecture that functions like a connector between two sections of the city, two areas of the city. It's in this area called Flaminio, which was one of the first extension of old city of Rome towards the north. And over the history, there are a few moments that marked the planning, which was very important. Behind the MAXXI, on the other side of the river, you have in the 30s a sports facility, very modern design by some major Italian architects of the time. And it was a project by Mussolini to build the first modern fascist sports center. To, the cult of the body was very, very important for fascist culture. And then this was called Foro Mussolini in the beginning. And then after the war, there was change into Foro Italico. So it's the Italian forum. And there's a monument of Mussolini still remaining there. Nobody wants to talk about that. It's the monument for the 10 years of Mussolini's rule. Right? And then you go across the river. In the 1960s, there was the Olympic Games in Rome, and there was the whole Olympic village was built there, with a few very important stadiums designed by Neri, Pierluigi Neri, who was a genius engineer and designer. And then in the 90s, there was this project to continue to develop this sports center into a more cultural complex. So behind the stadium, you have a new building, the auditorium designed by Renzo Piano. On the other side, around 2000, there's this project of the MAXXI. And in the future, in front of the MAXXI, there will be a project of a scientific museum, a scientific center. But it's wrong, so it might take another 30 years to start the thing. But anyway, it's a really long-term evolutive kind of urban planning project that extremely interesting in the sense that when we think about Rome, everyone thinks about the Colosseum or Pantheon or Vatican. It's an old city, right? And very few people really notice Rome has an amazing history of modernity, and has also this is not only reflected in the buildings, in the image of the architecture, but also in the urban planning process. So sorry, I said too much, but very quickly, and so the addition of the MAXXI continued with this logic of the urban expansion by connecting different areas to try to bring a public cultural life to this area. And then when I arrived there, and the first thing I was thinking about it, actually I never worked in a museum before. I was an independent curator and then curated in the Institute has a more or less like a Kunsthalle kind of situation. There was no collection. So I was very, very curious to do something about the collection. And I think a museum continue to make sense, especially with a collection continue to make sense. It's very important to reconnect it back to the original meaning of the works, not only to the current life, but also the original intention of the artist, what they want to do, how much a collection, contradictory, it's something that preserve a history, in the meantime stop the history. But how can we, by reintroducing the artwork from the collection, we reintroduce the continuation of creative aspect of the work. So I decided, working with the team, we have less than 3 months to work on this first project, and to revisit the collection, art and architecture. And I decided to put the art and architecture collection together to create a dialogue between two typology of creations, right? And then I gave a name to the exhibition. It's called Non basta ricordare, meaning it's not enough to remember. So the first thing that we do is to, of course, bring works back to dialogue between art, architecture, and so on. And then this is, for example, and then according to some thematic organization, for example, this area is about theater. So you have the dialogue between Thomas Schütter and Aldo Rossi, and so on. And then I was thinking also in a museum like this, it's extremely important to bring back the quality of reading art. It's not the quality, it's not only the number, the names, the importance of the work and so on, but also how much we can create a situation in which the audience can come back and sit in front of the art to create an intimate dialogue. So the entrance of the collection was a small room consisting of works by Franz West, the debut, Francis Alice, Cecil Zafar, and so on. To create it, and also Aldo Rossi, to create a kind of living room situation in which the audience can come and spend time. They don't need to look at the work, maybe, but they spend time there. And then the presentation, for example, this series of drawings by architecture drawings by the architects, the Debbio, who designed the Foro Italico. In our collection, there's about 30 pieces by him, and every week I ask the team to change the drawing on this shelf, right? So there are many things like this going on in the room, that people come back and they sit down, they just like at home, they open a book, they find out another thing there, and so on. So it started with a very intimate relationship between the audience and the work. So this intimacy can be shared by everyone, and that created a real significant meaning of being public. And then we go on with Kabakov installation, and then this section that is mentioned, and this is Kara Walker, and so on. So and then I try to reactivate the performance which are related to the works in the collection. So so this is, for example, this one was a performance by Elisabetta Benassi, who tried to reenact Pasolini with a guy riding a bicycle, not a bicycle, but a motorcycle. Normally it happened outside the museum, but this time I said, why don't we try to bring the motorcycle into the collection, and the guy can drive through it and run through it. And that was quite crazy. And then we have a lot of discussion of the conservation team how to do it, because according to the museum rules, it's very complicated. And we managed to get an electric motorcycle. Number one, there's no smoke and not much noise, and then we went through it. But still, imagine this, it would never happen in the MoMA, unfortunately. So, and then we continue to do many performative things. And then, so this is the first collection show, and then the collection continues to develop. And then since last year, we have I have a new director of art department, Bartolomeo Pietro Marchi, and then our architecture director, Margherita Cuccione, and with the team, they come up with a new display of the collection. And this time, of course, we continue to have this conversation between art and architect. And also we have highlights in which artists come to realize or re-realize works or projects in the collection. For example, this is a performance by, the performance is by the name of the artist. Anyway, doesn't matter. A very important artist from Rome, and she did this mandala pattern with beads, with plants. So it's a whole process lasts for 3 months, and every day you can come to see how this is being realized. And then we have the archive presentation, that different kind of archive about contemporary art happening in Rome and in Italy into the museum, and people can come to study that. And then we decided also to open the collection section. One of the main gallery was free from Tuesday to Friday for everybody. So that was also a huge effort that we tried to make to open up this accessibility. And then the collection goes out of the museum and goes into a historical context. We have a collaboration with the Museum of Palazzo Barberini, which is the National Museum of Historical Art. So we brought our collection to be integrated into the museum in dialogue with the old collection. For example, this is a piece by Paolini in dialogue with the painting by the most important Roman artist. Caravaggio. And then in the museum we have a kind of we brought a sculpture from the historical collection in dialogue with a piece by Vanessa Beecroft as well. And then being a museum of art and architecture, in the traditional way they were separated, and I decided to work with the team to put them back together into a new dialogue that redefines the museum as an urban museum, that through the dialogue between art, design, architecture, urbanism, we try to come up with a new understanding of what creation, contemporary creation means. So we developed a program that brings art and architecture together. For example, this one is called Transformers, that we invited 5 different artists who are also designers, like Che Donghua, Martino Gamper, Pedro Reyes, Didier Faustino, to come together to build new installations. And a part of the work also goes to the city. And then we also develop conversation between art and science. This is Gravity. It's a collaboration between the MAXXI and the National Institute of Nuclear Technology, Italian spatial agents. So with this, we come up with, for example, a new piece by Saraceno, Thomas Saraceno, using the antenna which was sent to the European Spatial Laboratory, and then Fisher and Weiss, and other works. And so every time we have this interesting dialogue, that actually created a line of research for us, this dialogue between different disciplines. And then we also touch on some really important, urgent political, economic, social questions. So this is Utopia for Sale. It's a homage to Alan Sekula, who worked a lot on the question of trading, global maritime economy, and so on. And this is Li Liao, an artist Liana knows well, I think. He lives in Shenzhen where they produce the iPad, and he actually put himself into the real uniform of the worker. He actually signed a contract to work for the iPad factory for 6 months, and then with the money he made, he could only afford to buy a small iPad. So
Actually, he was in my show here last year.
Yeah.
He had this great project shooting the different cities' mayor offices for 8 hours empty mayor office. So we did it in Yekaterinburg when I did the biennial there, and we tried to ask at that time Belgrade mayor to give us empty office during the working hours to shoot.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen.
And this is also
Stays
very interesting.
unrealized.
This is Amy Siegel, a American artist who actually researched on Chandigarh, where was this congress building by Corbusier. And actually she found out that people for the last few years suddenly pay attention to this place, which was long time abandoned, more or less, and what they pay attention to is to collect the furniture. There was design for the meeting rooms and all this public furniture, and then people start collecting it and renovate it and sell them in auction in Christie's. So she actually researched all these things. Just be careful in Belgrade. I'm sure there's a lot of this leftover of socialist, modernist design, right? And then this is and then during the exhibition we also have workshops and having a direct education program to talk about the question of global economy, and then immigration. And I quoted the Led Zeppelin song, Immigration Song, as the title, and to present 2 very important, very interesting video works about immigration. And then another project that we had last year and they traveled to also after us traveled to Spain, to Ivan in Valencia. It's called Please Come Back. The World as a Prison. So basically, it's about different kind of the history of prison from the time of the research of Foucault to now. That the physical prison and also how the city becomes a prison, and now the globe, the planet becomes a prison because of the internet, because of satellite, and so on, and what happens, how artists engage with this research. This is AES, and this is where the title comes from. It's a Claire Fontaine piece called Please Come Back. And then this is the New Zealand artist, what's his name? Simon Terry. Simon Denny. Thank you. Oh, I woke up too early this morning. Simon Denny, yeah. And this is a few more artists, Biscotti, Lim, and so this is a project about different kind of typology of prison, how we actually have to deal with this new condition of living under permanent control. And this is the show going to Spain. And then the MAXXI is situated in Rome. Rome is situated in the middle of this conversation between Europe and the Mediterranean region. And this is what actually formatted the identity of what we call contemporary Europe, right? And in the meantime, I also found out, thank God, I was very lucky to be a curator of the Istanbul Biennial, 2007. I showed the beautiful work of Ivan, and beautiful work, very painful work about the court judging Milosevic in that show. So because of this, and I have developed a very, let's say, again, a home-like relationship with Istanbul, and also I found really interesting that what happens in Istanbul at the time, it's being realized now in the whole Middle East, in the sense that there's a dream for modernity, there's a dream for modernization, and then it went down to a very complicated collapse. Let's say the dream of Atatürk, and the consequence. It's now what's happening with the end of with Erdogan coming to power, and with also the whole Middle East question, and that's actually traced back also to Iran and so on, and Beirut and all this. So basically, we decided to develop an ongoing program on the relationship between Europe and Mediterranean region. So we started, the first exhibition was, I arrived in the museum just right after that. I decided to do it, and we didn't have time to do a new project. So I invited the show curated by Catherine David and other people in the Musée d'Art Moderne in Paris. It was the first major contemporary art show about Iran. So we, with a very particular angle, very interesting, it's called Unedited History. Then we brought this exhibition to the MAXXI. And then the next one is about Istanbul. And I was very lucky to curate the show with a colleague from Istanbul and our team. The story started with the Taksim occupation movement, and it goes on to look at the urban change, the impact of urbanization on art production, gentrification, and also political struggles, feminism, street violence, migration, and at the end, the future. And all this, it's using the story of Istanbul from 2015 to now to really help us to understand this back and forth kind of tension relationship. And then the also performances. And then last year we worked on a project about Beirut. It's called Home Beirut. And how actually Beirut after the civil war, how people try to rebuild their home. And what does that mean today, being at home? And so that, sorry, I don't have time to go through the details, just give you a first impression. And it covers also the question of urbanization and war and so on, and music and joy, and also we have performances. So, and then now we are having two major exhibitions on African cities, African contemporary art. One is about African city, a kind of imagined cosmopolitan future city. And another work is about another project called Road to Justice, which is about, oh, by the way, it's very interesting. There's a few words with Chinese in it. I don't need to explain how much Vienna is working on this project about the influence of China's new ambition, global ambition, in here, of course, and also in Africa, and especially in Africa. And then Road to Justice is about this post-colonial transition of Africa. And then we all, of course, as a museum, we also have a series of monographic exhibitions of major artists that have very often been kind of ignored by history, or they are famous for not really having the right position in the narrative. So someone like Huang Yongping, Ettore Spalletti, Maurizio Nanucci, Piero Girardi, and also Lara Favaretto, you know. And then we also encourage the young generation, especially from Italy, or artists working in Italy, or show in Italy. And so we have this prize called the MAXXI prize in the beginning, and now it's called Bulgari, because Bulgari gave us some support, which is very good. And then, of course, we have some really interesting architecture projects. The MAXXI has 300,000 objects in the architecture collection, which consists of a lot of major figures in architecture from Italy, like Scarpa, Nevi, Piano, Super Studio, and all this. They have a lot of works in our collection. We offer a research center for the archive center for researchers as well. So this is the Super Studio team. After 50 years, they come back. So the show is called 50 Years of Super Studio. And then they design the exhibition. Maybe the first time they really realized one of their drawings. And then the exhibition went to Shanghai, to the power station, and we have developed really a lot of collaborations with international institutions. So on our website, there's a special section called MAXXI in the World. And then Japanese House, and it's a beautiful project about the history of Japanese architects, how they design single family houses. Extremely beautiful. And this exhibition also traveled to Barbican in London, and then the Tokyo Modern Art Museum. And then this is the latest project we just finished with about Bruno Zevi, the major architectural historian and activist politician who has influenced a whole three generations of architects from Italy. And then we have the Young Architecture program that every summer we have a competition to select a young architect to design a public platform for the summer activities. And then one really interesting thing that we usually don't do in a museum is to invite other organizations to meet in the museum as a regular program. So these institutions are not other big museums, but they are very small organizations run by artists, run by independent people. So I call it the independent. And Italy is a very decentralized country. So many things happen in small towns or small areas with independent initiatives. So being the National Museum, I think we have the responsibility to render this visible to the public. So we created a platform in the museum, and there's some walls in which regularly we invite those organizations to come to take it over and present their project, having conferences and so on. And also on our website, we have a special website for that you can actually go to the mapping of these organizations and connect it with them. And then there's an online magazine. The name is very interesting. It's called Garibaldi. It's like maybe we should call Tito. But it's really interesting. Garibaldi as the symbol of independence. Right? Of course, it's a little bit ironic as well. So. And then we have a very developed education program with schools, having artists to work with different schools and from kids to older people, and then we also have helped them to realize their own exhibitions. And then, I don't know if we have time, but I just want to talk about this last project. It's called Open Museum, Open City. It happened within about 2 months in the museum. And as you see, the MAXXI in the afternoons are like this. In front of the museum, we have a very open plaza. It's called, the name of the plaza is Alighiero Poeti, which is very nice. So the Poeti Plaza for the neighborhood. So every day, weekends, you have kids running around, playing football. Parents are here, playing, talking to each other, having drinks, and so on. And we also think, really, the MAXXI is this. The MAXXI should be the public forum, and near us, you have the Foro Italico is constantly closed. That history has to be revisited and analyzes and so on, but nobody does that. So basically, they close it up. Only there's a football game. There's the new stadium you can go to see. The Zagreb or the Belgrade against Rome or something. And most of people go to that place for that, but they don't care about the forum. And then the Roman Forum used to be the prototype of democracy, whatever you call it democracy, but democracy, civic society in the Western history. It was the prototype. The city of Rome was the prototype. And the most important thing was happening in the forum. Well, you have the market, you have all kind of institutions, people stand up and talk about politics, they fight each other, and so on. And today, of course, there's a room, but there's also a Disneyland, basically. So it brings a lot of economy to the city, thanks to that we have money in Rome, right? But on the other hand, it's somehow changed, the nature of this place changed. So I think it's time for the MAXXI to become a new public forum. So one night I was flying from excuse me for the very bad journey. I was flying from San Francisco to Paris, And I could not sleep, and I say, let's do something about this. And then I start drawing the museum by heart, the floor plan. You can see the floor plan, how complicated it is. It's like a, how to say, it's not a spiral, it's like a it's a highway interchanger, basically. So I said, let's make this highway interchanger into a new forum. So it's called Open Museum, Open City. So what we do is actually, during this 2 months' time, we completed the museum. I was really lucky that come to a museum that was so new that we could easily remove the works from the presentation. If you go to the MoMA, the Pompidou, you can never do that. And in my lifetime, maybe the only one time I can do that. So with the team, we decided to take the risk. So we empty the whole museum. You come in, there's nothing to see. And then we invited 10 artists, including Bill Fontana, Ryoji Ikeda, and to do some installations. So Bill Fontana spent 2 months in Rome and researched into all the water system, from fountains to underground waterways and so on. And then he made the piece. I don't know if there's a sound or not. I don't know if we can have the sound. Okay, you can just imagine. Okay. When you come to the MAXXI, you hear water. The water running, and then sometimes some noise, other noise, like the underground, the subway, and so on. So we basically bring the whole city into the museum through the water sound. And then this work was donated by the artist, and it was stated for as a permanent piece. So if you come to the MAXXI, you can still see it here. And this is, other works, Justin Bennett, and so on and so forth. So very beautiful work by 10 different artists who deals with the question of the origin of the world, the city, the public space, the private space, the utopia, and also the miracle, the oracle, the destiny of our life in the future. So that was incredibly interesting. And then we just imagine all kinds of different sounds, but there's basically no music. It's all sound in the pure sense. And then the only work that has some lights was this piece by Jean-Baptiste Gane, who actually, Ivan must know it. He was from the Rice Academy. This was the piece he developed from that time. And it's a reading the book of Don Quixote, but with the Morse code. So the red lights reflect the Morse code, reading the whole book. So for about 3 weeks, endless, it goes on. And then we have a collaboration with an art radio project called RAM in Rome to create an online radio in which the public can contribute to send their own recording to this radio, and you can listen it. And then in the opening, and also every day in the afternoon and the evening, we have performances happening. You can see a lot of people coming to the empty museum. And then you have dance, performance, and also we created a mobile amphitheater that goes to different rooms to organize debates on the thematic questions. For example, this is Massimo Cacciari, who was the mayor of Venice, who's a very important philosopher, coming to talk about the question of the beginning of the world. Okay. So there's a lot of debates and book reading, poem reading as well. And then we have the publication which is kind of on ontology, on the question of the relation between sound and public space. And then we have a app on the phone. You can download it and you can listen to those sounds, and then you can visit the exhibition, and you can also contribute your recording. And then now we are working on something which is totally opposite. I'm not going to tell you exactly what is going to happen, but there's about 150 artists coming with their work to fill up the museum. Instead of being empty, this time it's completely packed. And then, so maybe I just show you one image, which is extremely important for us, the David Hammers. And this is for Fact Free. It's a piece that he did in the 90s, actually. Something almost like a performance. It's not really performance. He was picking a water, how do you call it? To carry the water basket, yeah, on the street in Brooklyn, and just all the way taking this and that inaugurated the exhibition. So you will see the rest. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have some time for questions. So, and we have a mic with Katarina. So.
Questions?
I have a question for you regarding.
Regarding the program, like how much was important for being a new member of such a big institution that has very big burden of the collection, actually to work with different institutions to develop different programs, and do you do that actually through your exhibitions, and how you actually open those international networks, and what kind of networks you are trying to build through the MAXXI within this very specific locality of the institution, and your experience working on different places. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is the theme that I didn't have time to develop on this introduction. The MAXXI has a program called Expanding the Horizon. That is basically, we invite other institutions to come to present their collections. So we work with the Korean National Museum of Contemporary Art in Seoul. We presented a collection of the Korean video art. And then we presented a collection of the Krakow, the Polish, Poland, the Krakow Contemporary Art Museum collection, and so on. And every year we have a collaboration with at least one or two institutions like this, and we have a regular collaboration with Deutsche Bank Art that we present the artist of the year in the museum. We just opened one with this artist from Beirut, Kadim Aoun, last week. It was very good. So it goes on, and as I mentioned, some of our exhibition travel to other institutions. Huang Luping's exhibition went to Beijing and Shanghai. The Super Studio went to Shanghai, and our photography exhibition called Extraordinary Visions. It's an Italian landscape photography exhibition that went to India now. It's in India. Our collection is now a part of our collection traveling in Tunisia and Morocco and Beirut. And then the next big travel is going to be in Ivan. We exchange our collection. Ivan is the main contemporary art museum in Valencia. Well, please come back one day. And then the collection will go to the Deutsche Bank, the new space called Palais Populaire, Palais Populaire in Berlin. They just opened that last week. So in 2020, our collection will go there. So we continue to do a lot of collaborations like this. And in terms of guest curating, we have Simone and Jaime who curated the African City Show, and now we're working with Stanka on a project about about artists from the ex-Yugoslavian context, and Stanka is working on this project for the end of next year as a part of the continuation of this Mediterranean research. So we did a lot of things on the southern side, and now we come back to the northern side. So so we are building a model of this kind of collaboration, but this collaboration is not simply bring something here, but every time it's a kind of a close collaboration dialogue with the other institutions or guest curators to make something specific. For example, the exchange of collection with Ivan, actually is our part will be curated by the director of Ivan, and their part will be curated by me and my team. So we always try to bring a new point of view on the existing collections. And then, so many exhibitions will travel.
Thank you. Any other?
No, just an observation and question. I think one of the characteristics of the MAXXI, that, to me at least, puts the institution in such a great position in Italy, in Rome especially, it's that it is an institution that constantly questions itself as institution, as a cultural institution. And I find it amazing in such a context like Rome. But the question is, you did so many things. You accomplished so many things. And, is there anything that you couldn't do, that it's impossible to do in Rome? And in the near future, you think you are, because you're always testing the limit of what contemporary art is doing. Do you feel that it's somehow getting not possible to do things that could have been done in the past?
Well, just be honest, the more things that we could not do than things that we can do in reality. There are many things that in our plans, in our projects, we cannot do because of many, many reasons. Sometimes very stupid reasons, like money, or typically it's stupid question of money. Right? We have a very small budget. Maybe comparing to here, in terms of numbers, bigger, but in fact, comparing to some other major museums in the world, we are actually very, very poor. When I said to my colleagues in New York the money that we have, they were laughing. They said, even not. But I also work with the Guggenheim, for example, for some shows, and the budget I can have in the Guggenheim for a project represents basically 1 year of our entire budget. Right? So the Guggenheim is a small museum in New York. It's not such a big museum. Their budget is like a middle-sized museum. So you can imagine, in a time of global circulation, there's so many things we cannot do. For example, I would love to not only to invite an artist, but just to borrow a painting from somewhere. The other day I tried to borrow a painting by a very important American artist. Our generation is not so old. And then the gallery sent us the codes for for the insurance. The insurance typically is 0.05% of the value, right? It's very small, but actually when we look at the actual numbers, I just cannot pay for it. And not to mention the crating, the shipping and so on. So we have a lot of things we want to do, we cannot do. But because of that, we have to do something that other people cannot do. So that's how we try to survive, not survive, to live correctly in a place like Rome or in a place like anywhere. So every time it's all about you cannot do things that other people can do, but you can also do things that maybe many other people cannot do so far. They might do it tomorrow, but it's already too late.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have more confusion actually, so I wanted to ask you if you can clarify. So during the talk, you mentioned a few things, like a common good. Then you mentioned Mussolini's plan. Then Zaha Hadid. Of course, I immediately think about the contemporary political situation, and I constantly started to think a lot about Hitler's museum as a battlefield through lecture performance. So I was curious if you can mirror your institution work, also the trustees that you mentioned and fundings, if you could mirror it to her lecture performance. Yeah.
Okay. I have to clarify one thing. We don't have a board of trustees as the American one. We have a administration council, if you translate it like English. Yeah. So this is not people who have money and sit there and give us money. This is people who are representing different institutions from the government or professional institutions like colleagues. So this is a committee that gives us an improvement every year for our program. That it's more about kind of expertise than money. So we don't have the same structure. We have friends of the museum that funded partially some activity, but it's like an association of friends who give us some support. They absolutely have no say on what we're doing. So just want to clarify this question of board of trustees, but this is an observation of a general tendency of many museums in the world today, and we might one day have to fall into the same requirements for some reasons. And this doesn't come from us, but it might come from the big boss. So that is the general tendency that we have to prepare to work with, and things like that. So, but on the other hand, I was quoting all these very contradictory, especially architectural examples. And I think every architectural project represents the ideology and also the political structure of that moment when it was conceived and built. Like this one, one of the things that I think Ivan knows very well was the Istanbul Biennial that I curated, and I chose to use the modernist buildings in the city. Well, usually you don't go to it when you're a tourist. And so we have the Atatürk Cultural Center, we have the textile market, and all this, well, very interesting kind of socialist modernist buildings, reminding us a lot of this, right? And these buildings, when I visited and decided to use them, because I was questioning that at 10 years ago in Turkey was the end of this dominant ideology of Atatürk, the whole project of modernization, westernization, and so on. That was generating such an incredibly interesting public institutions and buildings. But on the other hand, the momentum is gone. There's a new situation that politically, socially, the power of the traditional religious group are coming back, and also there's a new challenge of kind of global change and so on. So the modernization project doesn't work anymore. So how to deal with this heritage in terms of architecture, in terms of as a site of public life, and also as a symbol of the city. So basically, I invited artists to investigate those places and do site-specific presentations, works in those places to remind people that this place, the next battlefield. So basically, for example, the Atatürk Cultural Center, because of the biennial, the Biennale, it became a subject of public debate, and a lot of people suddenly organized themselves to defend this building when the government tried to take it down. And then the case went to the court and so on. And after 10 years, finally it was taken down, unfortunately. But it was a 10-year battle. It ended up being the Taksim Square occupation. And so basically, what I'm saying here is really to look at the contradiction of each side. The original project, the ideology behind it, the not only the ideology, and also the historical necessity behind it, and how it's being transformed in the current situation. How can we continue to remind people that there is a necessity to fight or to adapt to certain transformation. So this is something that I think would happen to the MAXXI in many ways. It's happening in the sense that nobody wants to take down MAXXI, of course. But on the other hand, what you do inside, how you negotiate with the, remind people the MAXXI was originally designed as an urban connector, as a street museum. It's a museum that continues the street life. And how can we use this museum in this way so this building continues to make sense? In the meantime, it comes back to help us to improve this dialogue with the public and what I call the public good, right? And as a kind of laboratory of a future society in which the notion of the public can be improved. As I said, being public doesn't mean being popular, but means to serve certain conviction that every individual in the public desire to have a better life, not only material but also spiritual. So that's basically the way that I wanted to bring, understand the meaning of the site. So I don't know, many biennial or larger exhibition projects I did in different cities always started with the research on the urban situation. So so it became a kind of I think methodology that for me really important. So lately I did the Shenzhen triennial of urbanism and architecture. So it happened in something called the urban village. it's a long story to tell. Maybe it's basically the city expanded, and it took over the villages. So the countryside, the people used to be living in the countryside, lost the land to farm. They have no more activities. So what they do is actually the government in exchange give them money, and then they use the money to build legal or illegal high-rise buildings. It becomes a very dense kind of area in which they rent out these houses to new immigrants into the city. And then it becomes a kind of relatively autonomous areas because the urban authority doesn't have the right to rule them, and they have to self-organize the administration, and very often the mafia is there and so on. But on the other hand, you have absolutely a lot of incredible freedom to do a lot of things in those areas. So there's a very interesting thing, it's like this kind of, it's not a slum, it's not, sometimes it's not so poor, but it's like a kind of different urban typology insert into a new city, for example. So that kind of context also reminds me of the function of an institution. How we can have an institution that condenses a lot of laboratories of different ways of living, from secret casino to prostitution to canteen, free canteen for everybody, and for good and for bad, all together to make actually the city interesting. A city without this kind of equipment, it's really very boring. It's, so in a way, I think it's really important to bring the contradictory elements together to understand what kind of potential conditions that we can draw from there and translate it into a resource of inspiration, energy, and learning from the so-called grassroots people, how much they are creative. So that's the thing that, I think a museum should always open to these possibilities.
Maybe one more question if anyone has. Yes? So,
I would like to ask, a lot of your projects, Istanbul, Beirut, what is the biggest challenge to bring something that's very foreign to most of the Italian audience in an exhibition? How do you make a little part of the city's atmosphere come to life?
Well, there are many tricks. Well, I think that the main trick is to understand why these artists do these things living in the city like this, starting from there. It's a question about how to understand and interpret the work and create a dialogue with the artist to say, if you don't live in Istanbul, would you do the same kind of work? Starting from this question. Or if you don't live in the city at this moment, would you do the same thing? And starting from there, you get a certain kind of entrance to a larger picture. And from there, you work with, ideally, for example, a co-curator from the area. Like the Istanbul, I would not be able to call 20 artists, 30 artists, they're all friends. But there are a lot of things that I would miss if I didn't have my co-curator to work on that. And then I brought my curatorial team 3 times to Istanbul to visit, stay, not only to visit artists, but also visit the city. And come back, we discuss what to do. The same for Beirut. Actually, the Istanbul show took us 1 year to prepare. The Beirut, 3 months. because, as I said, I have no money to do things a year or 2 years before, because I was waiting for the approval for the budget for the next year at the end of December. And so on.
That's very coming here.
Yeah, and then in January, I said, of course, December nobody works. And so after the 15th of January, I can have a first meeting with my team, say, okay, let's plan for a trip to go to Beirut. It takes another 2 weeks to call everybody to say, if I come to Beirut, can I meet you at this period, and so on. So until we have maybe 80% of people say yes, and we decide to choose the day to go there. And then, of course, the ticket cost maybe more. So, all this. So at the end, we have 3 months to work on this project. We went back 4 times to Beirut to do this and to do the research and try to understand. And I brought our exhibition designer with us. We have 4 girls now, also a boy, in the designer team. They are doing incredible work, amazing. So one of the designers came with us and looked at the situation, and then she came back with a very interesting proposal of the structure. So you can see a few images. You have these walls and so on. That actually somehow translates the urban situation, and so it's not to show the work as the perfect object, but it's trying to show the relationship between where it was created and what's the relation between the artist, the object, and the environment.
Well, last question, will you be doing similar visits to the region with your team, together with Zdenka?
This time, I relied a lot on Zdenka, but our co-curator, Julia Ferracci, she will come with her to do some research too. So
we will see you soon.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming, and I would like to thank again Italian Institute for everything they did for us and they're still doing, because we do a lot of workshops at their place. I would like to thank our new supporter, Wiener Stadische Company, which is also my very important part of the project, to think how the private becomes public. Good, and I would like to point to a new work by Saša Tkačenko. It's a new flag that comes with every lecture. So I would like to invite you to come to us again on Monday. In a few days, we will be hosting amazing, fantastic curator Elena Filipovic. She's the director of Kunsthalle Basel and the chief curator, so she will be giving a workshop to our curators, and she will give a public talk on Monday. So I hope to see you then. Thank you very much.